Picture a room in ancient Alexandria. The year is 367 AD. The air is thick with the smell of dust, smoke, and the heavy tension of impending violence. A group of church officials stands around a heavy oak table in a stone chamber. Before them lie dozens of manuscripts, gospels, letters, secret teachings, documents written on papyrus that would later be known to history as the Gnostic texts. With a simple, cold gesture, Bishop Athanasius, the architect of orthodoxy, separates the pile into two distinct categories. To the left, the approved texts. These will be copied, preserved, and distributed to every corner of the Roman Empire to become the New Testament as we know it today. To the right, the forbidden pile, the heresy. These are marked for fire. Among the papers destined for the flames is a specific, controversial teaching. It is not a rule, it is not a commandment. It is a technical manual about human physiology and consciousness. Specifically, it discusses a phenomenon that modern medicine dismisses, but the ancients revered. A sound, a frequency, a ringing in the ears that certain people perceive while others hear only silence. The officials knew exactly why this teaching had to disappear. They understood that if the common people grasped the mechanics of this internal signal, the entire power structure of the institution would be threatened. Because if a human being could access the divine source directly through an internal frequency, they would never need a priest again. They would never need an intermediary. They would have a direct line to the absolute. So they burned it. They hunted down the scribes. They erased the memory of these practices from the collective consciousness of the West. Or at least, they thought they did. 16 centuries later, in December 1945, an Egyptian peasant named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging for fertilizer near the limestone cliffs of Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt. His shovel hit something hard. He paused, brushing away the sand, expecting to find a stone. Instead, he uncovered a sealed red earthenware jar, almost a meter high. Inside, he didn't find gold. He didn't find jewels. He found something far more dangerous to the established order. He found 13 leather-bound codices, the books that survived the fire. And inside those books, buried in the dry sand for nearly 2 millennia, the teaching about the frequency was waiting. If you are watching this, you have likely encountered the concept of the ringing sound. Perhaps you have experienced it yourself. A sudden high-pitched tone, a static sound that comes and goes, or a pressure in the head that has no medical explanation. For decades, modern society has labeled this a defect, a malfunction, tinnitus, a misfiring of the auditory nerve. But in this video, we are going to decode the forbidden manuscripts of Nag Hammadi to understand the alternative view. We will analyze the Gnostic concept of the monad, the entity they believed was the true source, and the 3 specific frequencies described in these lost texts. We are going to strip away the mysticism and look at the mechanics of this phenomenon through the lens of lost history, psychology, and the strange parallels with modern simulation theory. To understand the sound, we first have to understand the map. The worldview of the people who wrote these texts was radically different from what is taught in modern schools or churches. The Gnostics, the authors of texts like the Apocryphon of John and the Gospel of Thomas, did not believe that the material world we see is the ultimate reality. They argued that we are living in a construct, a simulation, a copy of a copy. They taught that the ultimate source of existence is called the monad. The monad is not a god in the sense of a man with a beard on a cloud. The monad is pure consciousness, infinite, indescribable. It is the silence before the sound. It is the static potential of the universe before the Big Bang. According to these texts, the world we physically inhabit was not created by the monad directly. It was created by a lesser entity, a craftsman, a flawed architect. They called him the demiurge. This is the core of the Gnostic warning and the foundation for understanding the signal. They believed the material world is a dense, heavy system designed to keep consciousness trapped in a loop of consuming, fighting, reproducing, and fearing. The demiurge built this reality to feed on energy, specifically low-frequency emotional energy. This cosmological framework bears a striking resemblance to the modern simulation hypothesis proposed by philosophers like Nick Bostrom, or the cinematic universe of the Matrix. The idea is that the reality we perceive is a programmed illusion, and that there is a base reality existing outside of it. For the Gnostics, the monad is that base reality. And the ringing sound? That is the leak in the simulation. This brings us to their categorization of human psychology. The texts found at Nag Hammadi divide humanity into three distinct psychological types based on how they interact with this simulated reality. It is a hierarchy of awareness. First, the hylix. The name comes from the Greek word hyle, meaning matter. In the Gnostic view, the hylix is a person who is entirely identified with their physical body. They believe they are their body. Their concerns are purely external: material gain, status, physical pleasure. They are the characters in the video game who think the game is all there is. When the ringing frequency occurs for a hylix, they do not hear it. Or, if they do, they perceive it only as a nuisance to be medicated away. Their internal receiver is effectively turned off because their focus is 100% tuned to the frequency of the simulation. Second, the psychics. This comes from psyche, meaning soul or mind. These people are the majority. They sense there is something more to life than just matter. They follow religions. They follow rules. They want to be good citizens. They have a connection to the divine, but it is weak. It flickers like a candle in the wind. They rely on belief, on faith, and on what external authorities, priests, politicians, scientists tell them is true. They are the skeptics who want to believe but need proof that the simulation never provides. And then there is the third category, the pneumatics. From the word pneuma, meaning spirit or breath. The texts describe the pneumatics not as superior people, but as different people. These are individuals who possess a dormant component in their consciousness, a spark that originated directly from the monad, bypassing the demiurge entirely. The pneumatic often feels a sense of profound alienation from society, a feeling of being a stranger in a strange land. They look at human rituals, at the obsession with politics and war, and they don't just feel bored, they feel confused. They feel like they are watching a movie that everyone else thinks is real. They have a deep, nagging suspicion that something is wrong with the world. For the Gnostics, this is where the ringing comes in. They argue that the pneumatic has a built-in receiver, a biological radio. And that sound? That is not tinnitus. That is the monad broadcasting a carrier wave. It is a homing signal designed to pierce through the noise of the material matrix and remind the spirit of its true origin. Let's pause the history for a moment and look at this analytically. Is there any logic to this, or is it just ancient science fiction? When we look at the Gospel of Philip, one of the most controversial texts found in the jar, it speaks of ears beyond ears. It speaks of a hearing that does not rely on air pressure hitting an eardrum. Modern neuroscience tells us that the brain interprets electrical signals. Your eyes don't see, your brain sees. Your ears don't hear, your brain hears. If you stimulate the auditory cortex electrically, a person will hear a sound, even in a perfectly silent room. The famous Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung studied these Gnostic texts deeply. He believed they weren't just describing gods and demons, but psychological states. Jung suggested that the gnosis, or knowledge, was actually a connection to the collective unconscious database of universal truth that exists within the human psyche. When a person accesses this deep layer of the mind, it often manifests as sensory phenomena, lights, geometrical patterns, and yes, sounds. The material world operates on entropy. Things fall apart, noise, chaos, distraction. The monad's world, according to the theory, operates on syntropy, order, connection, silence. When these two fields intersect, friction occurs. Think of it like a radio in your car. When you are between stations, you hear static. That white noise is the sound of the receiver trying to lock onto a signal. The Gnostics suggested that the ringing is exactly this. It is the friction caused when a high-frequency consciousness is trapped in a low-frequency vessel. The body is dense. The spirit is light. The ringing is the vibration of that incompatibility. It is interesting to note that in almost every mystical tradition, not just Gnosticism, sound is the primary vehicle of creation. In the beginning was the Word, the Vedic Om. The concept of Nada Brahmate world is sound. Even the string theory of modern physics suggests that at the bottom of reality, beneath the quarks and electrons, there are only vibrating filaments of energy. So when the church burned these books, they weren't just hiding a religious idea. They were hiding a mechanism. They were hiding the user manual for the human receiver. Now, we must go deeper into the technical aspects found in the texts. The manuscripts, specifically the dialogues found in the Pistis Sophia and the Apocryphon of John, allude to different types of energetic contact. It is not just one sound. The teaching suggests there are three distinct signatures or frequencies that the pneumatic experiences. Each one has a different function. Each one implies a different state of consciousness. The first frequency is often described as the awakening tone. This is the most common and often the most startling. It is a sudden, sharp, high-pitched ping. It usually happens in one ear only, often favoring the right ear, though not always. It lasts for a few seconds, maybe a minute, and then fades completely. In the Gnostic framework, this is an interrupt signal. The material system, the matrix of daily life, works by keeping the human mind on autopilot. You wake up, you check your phone, you go to work, you worry about bills, you sleep. It is a hypnotic rhythm. The awakening tone is designed to break that hypnosis. It is a pattern interrupt. The texts suggest that when this tone hits, it is a marker. It is the monad signaling importance. Whatever the individual was thinking, whatever they were doing, or whatever was about to happen is significant. It is a call to immediate presence. Most people dismiss this tone as random. They shake their head and move on. The Gnostic instruction was different. When the tone hits, the initiate stops. They freeze. They observe their environment. They observe their thought process. They ask, what was I just thinking? Was it a lie? Was it a truth? Was it a warning? The tone acts as a highlighter pen for your consciousness. The second frequency is the sustained resonance. This is different. This is not a sharp ping. This is a low, steady background hum. It sounds like the electricity of the universe. It is often heard at night or during deep meditation, or when one is in nature, far away from city noise. The church wanted people to believe that connection to God required external noise chants, bells, choirs, sermons. But the Gnostic tradition teaches that the connection is found in this subtle internal hum. This frequency is described as the carrier wave of the Pleromathy divine fullness. When one hears this, it indicates alignment. It means the internal state has matched the frequency of the source. The individual is in tune. In this state, the Gnostics believed that the archons, the rulers of the material world, the systemic forces of fear and control, cannot touch the consciousness. They operate on the bandwidth of heavy emotion, fear, anger, lust, greed. Those are heavy, slow vibrations. The sustained resonance is too fast for them. It renders the mind invisible to their influence. It is a spiritual stealth mode. When you hear this sound, you are standing in the eye of the storm. The world may be chaotic around you, but you are connected to the stillness. The third frequency is the pressure wave. This is the rarest and the most intense. It is often not heard as a sound, but felt as a vibration, a sensation of fullness in the head, a pressure between the eyebrows or at the base of the skull. The text titled The Hypostasis of the Archons refers to a spirit descending that feels like a heavy weight of light. This is the activation signal. In modern terms, we might call this a download. It is a massive transfer of information that the conscious mind cannot process yet. It is a software update for the human biocomputer. When this happens, intuitive capabilities spike. Dreams become lucid and vivid. Synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that defy statistical probability, start happening rapidly. You think of someone, they call. You need an answer, a book falls off the shelf. You have a sudden urge to turn left instead of right, and you avoid an accident. The church officials in Alexandria were terrified of this specific state. A human being operating at this level of intuition is uncontrollable. You cannot scare them with hellfire. You cannot bribe them with heaven. They simply know. And a person who knows cannot be ruled. So what did the Gnostics actually do with this information? If you found yourself in a secret meeting in the 2nd century, huddled in a cave or a private room, you would not be asked to pray for forgiveness. You would not be asked to tithe. You would be taught the technique of attunement. The burned manuscripts hint at a practice of listening to the silence. It is a paradox. How do you listen to silence? The technique, reconstructed from the fragments and analysis of meditative practices of the era, involves a deliberate shift in attention. Usually our attention is directed outward, to the screen, to the voice, to the world. Or it is directed at our internal dialogue, the chatter of the mind, the endless loop of past and future. The Gnostic practice was to move attention away from the thoughts and toward the sound itself. Here is the mechanism described in the texts. When you hear the ringing, the instinct is to ignore it. The Gnostic instruction is to embrace it. You turn your focus toward the sound. You make the sound the object of your meditation. You treat the sound as a physical object that you are observing. As you focus on the high-pitched ring, something strange happens. It gets louder. It changes texture. It expands. It transforms from a monotone into a complex chord. The text Zostrianos, another Nag Hammadi discovery, describes a voyager ascending through realms of light by using sound as a ladder. By focusing on the internal frequency, the Gnostic practitioner anchors themselves in the present moment. They detach from the narrative of the material world, the simulation, and attach to the signal of the monad, the base reality. This is not magic. It is attention management. It is cognitive restructuring. The moment you focus on that sound, you stop thinking about your past. You stop worrying about your future. You exist in pure presence, and in that pure presence, the negative forces of the mind starve. They have no negative emotion to feed on. However, the texts also contain a warning, and this is crucial for anyone attempting to understand this phenomenon today. The moment an individual starts paying attention to the signal, the system will try to distract them. The Apocryphon of John describes the counterfeit spirit. This is a mechanism designed to keep the soul asleep. Have you ever noticed that the moment you decide to meditate, your nose itches? The moment you decide to improve your life, a crisis happens at work. The moment you try to focus on the silence, 1,000 loud thoughts scream for attention. The Gnostics would say this is not an accident. This is the immune system of the matrix attacking a virus, and the awakening soul is the virus. The resistance felt is proof that the signal is real. If the ringing was meaningless, the system wouldn't work so hard to make you ignore it. It wouldn't work so hard to medicate it away or label it as a disorder. The resistance confirms the path. The texts advise a stance of sovereign observation. The initiate does not fight the distractions. They do not fight the intrusive thoughts. They simply observe them, acknowledge them as not me, and then gently return attention to the frequency. They return to the sound, again and again. It is a mental muscle that must be built. Why is this surfacing now? Why was the Nag Hammadi library discovered in 1945? Think about the timing. 1945 was the year humanity detonated the first atomic bomb. It was the year we developed the power to destroy our own world. It was a threshold year. It is as if the earth itself released these texts at the exact moment humanity needed a reminder that the material world is not the only reality. And why are reports of this ringing phenomenon skyrocketing in the 21st century? Some researchers suggest that the veil is thinning, that as our technological world becomes more chaotic, the contrast between the signal and the noise is becoming sharper. As we move deeper into the digital simulation of the internet, the contrast with the organic spiritual signal becomes more obvious. The Church in 325 AD tried to burn the truth. They wanted a monopoly on the divine. They wanted the world to believe that the only way to the source was through their doors, their rituals, their books. They wanted to be the gatekeepers of the soul, but they failed. You can burn paper, you can break clay jars, you can execute heretics, but you cannot burn a frequency. You cannot excommunicate a vibration. The manuscripts were buried, but the signal continued to broadcast. It has been ringing in the ears of the seekers for 2,000 years, waiting for the moment when we would stop fearing it and start listening. You do not need to believe in Gnostic mythology to test this. You do not need to believe in archons or demiurges. You do not need to abandon your current faith or science. You only need to be an empiricist of your own experience. Next time the silence of your room is broken by that high-pitched tone, consider the possibility that it is not a mistake. Consider the possibility that it is a notification. Stop. Listen. Close your eyes. Shift your focus into the sound. Follow it. See where it leads. You might find that it is not a noise inside your head. You might find that it is the sound of the door unlocking.